right? Like I've been doing this like 40 something years. But I'm in a place now where acting, and I guess I go through phases, but I'm in a place now where acting, the craft, excites me as much as it did when I was 9 years old doing it.
The heartbreaking loss of Malcolm Jamal Warner shocked the world, but now the spotlight has shifted to a chilling question. Could his widow hold the key to a sinister conspiracy? While fans mourned the beloved star, whispers of hidden motives began to surface, pointing directly at the woman he trusted most. What started as a family getaway on the Caribbean shores of Costa Rica ended in headlines that no one expected. A man who had lived through the turbulence of Hollywood without so much as a public scandal was suddenly gone, and yet instead of clarity, we were handed a mystery. And like all mysteries, the pieces don't quite fit unless we start asking who might have benefited the most.
Incident took place on Sunday in Costa Rica. He was on a family vacation. He was swimming off of the coast of a town called Cocles in the province of Limon. He was swimming at Playa Grande. I mean, I've visited Costa Rica a few times. I was there with my family a few years ago, and those currents can be very strong.
Picture this. Warner on a breezy Sunday afternoon, enjoying the sun and surf with his wife and young daughter, a rare moment of privacy for a man who had built his career in front of millions. The waters of Playa Grande in Cajuta were supposed to offer tranquility, not tragedy, but within minutes, onlookers saw him pulled away by the current. Good Samaritans tried desperately to bring him back, but after 20 minutes of frantic attempts, the Costa Rican Red Cross declared him lifeless. And while tributes from Hollywood stars poured in, Anthony Mackie calling him such a beautiful human being, Tracy Ellis Ross mourning her first TV husband, another story began to bubble under the surface. Warner's wife, whose name is still carefully shielded from the public, stepped into the inheritance spotlight almost instantly. It wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about power, about money, about secrets hidden in plain sight. We all remember how fiercely Warner protected his family's privacy. In interviews, he never revealed his wife's name, never shared his daughter's face, never gave tabloids the easy target they craved. He built a fortress of secrecy around his personal life. But now that very secrecy is feeding speculation. Who is this woman who suddenly controls his estate, his royalties, his creative catalog, even whispers of offshore investments tied to Hollywood insiders? Her silence has only added fuel to the fire. While Warner's colleagues reminisce about his kindness and his artistry, the FBI reportedly has its eyes on the person closest to him. Not a stranger, not an opportunistic hanger-on, but his widow.
Look, I enjoyed everything there was to enjoy about growing up on television, but there was a responsibility because I had a head on my shoulders and I was around other people who had a head on their shoulders. So that access didn't really come down my path because I wasn't around those kind of elements.
This is where we start hearing the phrase that has already turned into an online obsession, the widow's secret fortune. It sounds like the title of a soap opera, but insiders insist it's much more than gossip. Multiple sources close to the family have claimed that Warner had set up accounts in places far beyond Los Angeles or New York. Accounts tied to joint ventures with record labels, private producers, even a few old names from the Cosby era who supposedly still hold influence in the business. These weren't public deals. These were the kinds of arrangements people bury under layers of paperwork and limited liability shells. And with Warner gone, every penny, every contract, every future royalty now funnels into his widow's control. To the casual fan, it's just inheritance, a grieving wife collecting what's rightfully hers. But to those watching closely, the timing, the secrecy, and the scale of what's at stake raises unnerving questions. Did Warner's fortune come entirely from acting, music, and directing? Or was there something murkier beneath the polished surface? Insiders hint at backroom deals struck in the 1990s, when Warner transitioned from sitcom fame to directing music videos for some of the biggest names of the era. Any Heartbreak, I'm the Magnificent, even clips for British R&B groups. These projects were more than just artistic ventures. They were gateways into an industry notorious for shadow contracts and unspoken arrangement. Did Warner stash away millions in those years? And if so, why are they only being discussed now, after his tragic end in Costa Rica?
Their level of responsibility, having a wife and a daughter. So there's that. But there's also there is a newfound freedom that I'm having with my craft, right? Like I've been doing this like 40-something years.
Sources close to the family have murmured that investigators are already asking hard questions. How much money was funneled into accounts overseas? Which Hollywood names show up alongside his signatures on hidden contracts? And perhaps most importantly, how much did his wife know? Some suggest she was fully briefed, an active partner in protecting assets from the public eye. Others whisper that she may have stumbled into this fortune without ever realizing the scale of what her husband had built. But in both scenarios, one thing is certain: she now holds the keys. And those keys may be worth far more than anyone expected. Hollywood accountants have quietly noted how quickly Warner's royalties surged after his passing. Syndication of The Cosby Show alone funnels millions of dollars every year, despite the shadows cast by Bill Cosby's scandals. Add in Malcolm and Eddie reruns, residuals from The Resident, and streaming payouts from his more recent projects like Suits and Accused, and the numbers climb higher than fans imagine. Layer that on top of the alleged offshore fortune and we're staring at a windfall that feels almost unreal. But here's the question that keeps repeating in hushed tones. Could this be the reason Malcolm Jamal Warner's life was cut short? And what does his widow know that she's not telling us?
This is what happens when you put too much attention on the negative than the positive.
Her behavior in the days after the tragedy hasn't eased suspicions. Those who attended the private service described her as calm, composed, almost businesslike. A woman who had just lost her husband of 7 years, the father of her child, seemed more focused on logistics than lament. It could simply be shock, it could be resilience, but in Hollywood circles, where optics mean everything, people noticed. She didn't look shattered, one guest allegedly remarked. She looked like she was managing something. Managing what exactly? Add to that her history, what little we know of it. Friends of Warner admit they barely met her, if at all. Even his closest collaborators, the ones he recorded with, the ones he directed alongside, claim they were never introduced. A handful recall seeing her at events, standing at the edge of the room, leaving before conversations grew personal, almost as if she were more a shadow than a spouse. Now that shadow has stepped into the glaring light of inheritance. And the more people dig, the more silence they encounter. No interviews. No public statements, not even a tearful message of thanks to the fans who adored her husband. Just silence.
To remind you, as I remind myself, that no matter what's going on, there's always a reason to smile. Like if you just take a minute to stop and take stock, I guarantee you can find at least one reason to smile. And if for some reason you can't find a reason to smile, then that's probably the best time to be the reason for somebody else to smile.
For fans, the contrast is jarring. Warner lived his life in sound and rhythm, speaking openly about legacy, community, and truth. He told People magazine just last year that he wanted his podcast Not All Hood to show audiences his most vulnerable side. Vulnerable, but honest. His widow, in contrast, has given nothing. Silence can be dignified, but it can also be deafening. And that silence is where conspiracy blooms. Could this carefully guarded identity have been part of a long plan? A marriage shrouded in secrecy, designed to shield not just a family from paparazzi, but to obscure financial deals, inheritance clauses, and contracts that only activate upon a tragic ending. Some insiders claim Warner updated his will just months before the trip to Costa Rica. If true, that document could reveal whether his widow was always meant to become the sole gatekeeper, or whether last-minute changes tipped the balance of his empire in her favor.
Yeah, it's so unbelievable there. And Branson, I also was reading that just days ago, he had another podcast episode that was dropped, and now a lot of fans are starting to really listen to that as maybe one of his last times that you hear him.
It's here that grief collides with speculation, and the story takes its darkest turn. Because if Malcolm Jamal Warner was indeed swept away by a merciless current, then his passing is nothing more than heartbreaking misfortune. But if whispers of the widow's secret fortune carry any truth, then Hollywood may be staring at a story far stranger than fiction. Could this fortune be the reason Malcolm Jamal Warner's life was cut short? And what does his widow know that she's not telling us?
What's good? Yes, I got the flower in my hair. Today's my daughter's birthday. She put the flower there, so I'm rocking it. What? It's a beautiful day here in Atlanta. I just wanted to shout out and just spread some love and some good cheer. And life is out here lifing. right? For me and for everybody else.
And then we stumble upon the most unsettling piece of this puzzle, the missing podcast episode. Warner's Not All Hood had only been running for a little over a year, but it was already gaining traction for being raw, fearless, and unpolished in all the right ways. He wasn't just talking about art or nostalgia. He was digging into the uncomfortable truths about representation, about exploitation, about the invisible contracts that kept certain people rich and others silenced. Colleagues described him as freer than he'd ever been, finally able to say things he couldn't when tied to studio scripts. But according to whispers from someone who worked on the production team, there was one episode that never aired, an episode that was allegedly taped just weeks before the Costa Rica trip, in which Warner hinted at big names and hidden power brokers pulling strings behind closed doors. What happened to that recording? Insiders claim it vanished from the server. The raw files, the backups, even the producer's laptop copy, gone. We know Warner was proud of his vulnerability, telling People magazine that the podcast allowed him to show a side audiences never saw on television. But could this unaired episode have gone too far? Could Warner have been preparing to expose something that the industry couldn't afford to let out? Was he silenced before he could reveal too much?
They mentioned that they do typically patrol the area because of how crazy the currents and the water gets in that area. But that Sunday specifically, they did not patrol the area. But they have put out people and different officials in the area and other surrounding areas, and they upped their warnings following this. But they did send a rest in peace, and I guess just wanted to send some kind words, but wanted to explain.
It's hard not to see the timing as suspicious. A man who had managed to avoid scandal his entire career suddenly begins speaking more openly about corruption, just as his show starts gaining momentum, and then within weeks, he's pulled under by a current during a supposedly peaceful family vacation. Too many coincidences, too little explanation. Some say Warner knew his words could get him into trouble. That's why he shielded his family. That's why he avoided naming his wife publicly. He was protecting them. If so, then what does it mean that the widow, the very person he shielded most, is now at the center of this storm?
So there are new details in the tragic passing of Malcolm Jamal Warner. Yesterday, NVU asked me about the second person who was left in critical condition from this incident as well, from Malcolm's drowning incident. So People magazine is exclusively reporting that the second person who was taken by ambulance to the hospital and was in critical condition was actually a person not related to Malcolm Jamal Warner, but it was a person that was there.
The mystery deepens with the rescuer no one knows. Reports confirm a second man entered the water when Warner was struggling. A 29-year-old from Nicaragua, no apparent connection to Warner, suddenly dove in to help. At first, his bravery was celebrated. He was taken to a hospital in critical condition, and for days, the press wondered if he would pull through. But when he was discharged, the story went quiet. No interviews, no photographs, not even a name. For someone who risked his life to save a beloved star, his silence is almost louder than his actions. Why is his identity being protected so fiercely? Did he see something the public isn't supposed to know? Or is he part of a larger setup, a player in a script designed to look like tragedy while hiding something far darker? Authorities insist this was nothing more than a natural accident, but why has the investigation produced so few answers? The Costa Rican Judicial Investigation Agency confirmed that Warner was swept by a current, declared lifeless at the scene, and formally identified by family. But beyond those statements, the trail stops. No details on how far out he was, no timeline of events beyond a vague around 2:10 p.m., and no explanation of why the rescuer, once stable, has chosen to vanish from the public eye. Was he warned not to speak? Did he witness details that don't match the official account?
That this was one of the most challenging, it's known as one of the most challenging beaches because it's a beach known for local surfers. So they did have signs in English and Spanish warning of danger of drowning and other things, but there were no guards there at the time.
The questions grow even darker when we turn to the Costa Rican connection itself. Playa Grande, the stretch of shoreline where Warner spent his final moments, has long carried whispers of a double life. To tourists, it is sold as pristine paradise, white sands, turquoise waters, and ecotourism retreats tucked away from the noise of the mainland. But to those who dig beneath the glossy brochures, the same beaches have a reputation as staging grounds for meetings that were never meant to reach the headlines. Whispers of discreet transactions, quiet rendezvous between industry figures, and unspoken understandings sealed far from the prying eyes of Los Angeles or New York make the location more than just an innocent holiday spot. Local authorities have been careful with what they reveal about the area, but those who follow Hollywood's shadier networks point out that the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica has cropped up in rumors for decades. Its remote villas, private compounds, and lack of paparazzi presence make it an attractive escape for celebrities, but also for those seeking secrecy for reasons that go far beyond leisure. That duality, the postcard paradise masking a history of under-the-table dealings, casts Warner's sudden visit in a far more troubling light. If this beach has quietly hosted discussions that never appear in any press release, then why was Warner there at this exact moment?
People were wondering why weren't there any guards or patrol or anything on the beach as well, and why bystanders, people who aren't like official lifeguards, had to get involved. So there was a report by TMZ that there were no lifeguards on duty. Actually, there's a group called the Caribbean Guard, and this is a group of lifeguards and people who patrol beaches. They released a statement yesterday. They say, "We deeply regret the passing of Malcolm Jamal Warner."
Some insiders have begun connecting dots, pointing out that Warner's decision to bring his family on this particular trip could have provided the perfect cover. A family vacation looks innocent on paper, but it also offers a plausible excuse to be in a location known for its shadowy clientele. If Warner was indeed carrying sensitive knowledge about offshore accounts, about hidden deals in the entertainment world, was this getaway really designed for relaxation? Or was it arranged as a backdrop for something far more dangerous? The eerie part is how quickly the incident became framed as nothing more than a tragic accident, while the context of Playa Grande's history was brushed aside. Rarely does the media highlight that the same coastline has been flagged before in quiet reports about high-profile figures flying in under the radar. If Warner's passing was indeed more than misfortune, then the choice of setting seems deliberate, a message cloaked in the guise of nature's unpredictability. In a place already whispered about as a stage for unsanctioned negotiations, the idea that Warner's end could serve as a warning begins to feel chillingly plausible.
True that he got up for an early morning swim? That's what it was?
So yes, there are reports that he got up for an early morning swim and that this happened right after sunrise.
Listen, if you go on vacation, to these Caribbean islands, like that's what I like to do. Get up early in the morning, go jump in the water early, solo.
I do it all the time.
Yeah,
that's what I would do. I get up before the kids get up or before the wife gets up, and I would go swim. I'm a swimmer, so I would go swimming.
That possibility leaves us with a haunting question. Was Warner lured into the waves of Costa Rica not just by the current, but by a network of power determined to keep secrets buried beneath the tide? If Playa Grande has seen deals struck in silence before, then his final moments may not have been about leisure at all. Instead, they could represent a carefully calculated reminder to others in Hollywood who dare to pull back the curtain. And if that is true, then Warner's passing is not just personal loss. It becomes part of a much larger game that most of us will never see. What makes it worse is the widow's silence. She hasn't stepped forward once to address what happened on that beach. No words of thanks to the man who tried to save her husband. No acknowledgement of the Costa Rican Red Cross, who worked for over 20 minutes to revive him. Nothing. In any other circumstance, we'd expect at least a carefully written statement, some gesture of gratitude, but here, silence again. And silence, when it surrounds money, inheritance, and missing recordings, always raises more questions than it answers.
Historic and frozen in time is this iconic character. What did that mean for television, and what does it still mean to this day?
Sam, Theo Huxtable was me. Theo Huxtable was my brothers. Theo Huxtable was the first time someone that looked like me saw someone that looked like himself on television. He was the epitome of what we as kids, in a certain community were growing up, but he was also an American story.
You can't ignore the context. Warner had been circling back into the cultural conversation in a big way. His podcast wasn't fluff, it was diving headfirst into topics the industry has long avoided. Mental health in the Black community, exploitation of cultural movements like dance, the commodification of identity in media. He was speaking with clarity and confidence. He was touching nerves. And if the missing episode really did contain the kind of names insiders are hinting at, then Warner wasn't just reflecting on legacy anymore. He was tugging on a thread that could unravel very powerful interests. And so, we're left with layers of unanswered questions. A widow who has inherited an empire yet speaks not a word. A podcast episode that supposedly disappeared from existence. A rescuer whose identity remains cloaked in mystery. Offshore accounts that no one will admit exist but everyone whispers about. And an actor who built his career on honesty, on creativity, on avoiding the pitfalls of Hollywood's chaos, suddenly gone in the most improbable way. There are too many unanswered questions, too many coincidences. Is this a tragic accident or one of Hollywood's darkest cover-ups? Was Malcolm Jamal Warner taken by the sea or by something far more calculated? We may never get the full story, but the pieces we do have point toward a conspiracy that feels bigger than any one man. What do you think? Was this fate? Or was Warner silenced before he could expose the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this story is far from over. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the brightest stars vanish for reasons we're not supposed to understand. Goodbye for now.